In this video, I'm going to show you some easy steps to create an early 2000s drum and bass style known as Rufige. This sound emerged in the late 90s and early 2000s on labels such as Metalheadz and Reinforced Records, and spearheaded by legendary artists such as Goldie and his alias Rufige crew, as well as Loxy, Ink, Outrage, Digital, Spirit, and Breakbeats, to name a few. Not to mention some more underground names such as Knowledge and Skitty. Even a couple of Canadian producers you might have heard of, known as Gremlins and Stranger, were heavily involved with this sound. Rufige is all about raw breaks, heavy distorted sub bass, dark eerie synths, and rave stabs. It's best heard in a large dark warehouse setting where the rude and raw emotion of the sound can truly take over. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, let's start with the drums first, and let's talk about the drum patterns. So here's a basic two-step pattern that you must be all accustomed to now in drum and bass, with the snare in the 2 and 4 here. Now notice there's a shuffle in the middle with these 4 notes, which does a chicka chicka between the kick and snare. The most common pattern used in Rufige drum and bass, I call it the Steppa pattern. Essentially, you have the snare moved an 1/8 note earlier over here. Now, instead of doing this, what we can simply do is copy this entire section over here, and now you have the Steppa pattern. So that's the basis of the Rufige drum pattern. Now there are variations to this. Instead of this little shuffle here, you can take that out and add a kick over here. So you get this more of a stomping pattern. And then you can fully make it into a more stompy pattern by taking these 4 notes and again replacing it with a kick. So you get this boom, ka-boom, ka-boom. So those are the most common patterns in Rufige drum and bass. There's one more variation, which I call a delayed snare. So let's go back to the original pattern of the 2-step that we had. Essentially what we have is the snare delayed to this position and then moving the hi-hat here. So now we have this. Alright, so these are the most common patterns found in Rufige drum and bass. By the way, this drum break is found on the Acid Lab sample pack. Tons of breaks like this in this pack, as well as the OG Jungle sample pack. You can learn more down in the links below. So I'm going to go with this stompy pattern here. And let's duplicate this into a 4-bar pattern so we have less repetition. And on the 3rd section, I'm just going to add an extra kick at the end here, just for variation. I find it helps when you have these small little subtle variations within the pattern. The whole point is that we start with one strong 1-bar pattern. We're trying to get away from just a 1-bar loop. So we may repeat it to a 2-bar or 4-bar loop, which provides us a great building block for our track with that variation over here. Alright, now that we have the drums, let's move on to the bass. And oftentimes in Rufige drum and bass, we use distorted 808s or even sine wave sub basses. Now let's talk about the pattern used commonly in Rufige. So here's a regular quarter note 4/4 pattern with the kick 808 sound. Now, with Rufige drum and bass, we use a pattern that we call dotted quarter notes. Sometimes we call it a fake triplet. Essentially what we do is remove these notes, and this is 1 quarter note. To get a dotted quarter note, we just extend this and then fill the pattern by repeating this twice, and then just truncate this last note. And then we have this repeating 3-note pattern with the last note that's a bit shorter. And this is the pattern, often found in dance hall and of course in drum and bass. Now we can take this pattern, which is the basic building block of our bass line, and we can take these 2 notes, shift it a bit earlier, and now we have a variation like this. That's a really groovy variation. Now, in terms of the notes, oftentimes I'm just playing by ear, just feeling it out. The vibe of Rufige is a lot more moodier, darker. So we're playing adjacent notes and minor keys. So let's extend this to a 4-bar pattern. Let's try moving these 4 notes up to F, this one to a G sharp, and now we have this. All right, and then let's add some variation by quadrupling these last 4 notes here. Okay, let's hear it with the drums. Sounding rude and raw. By the way, for the sub bass, I'm using this new VST called Subcraft, which is dedicated for pounding 808s. Now check this out. I really like this terrain pad, which allows you to alter the harmonics on top of the sub bass. So some really cool sounds you can get just by adjusting this pad here. It's also got some really sick presets. Check this one out. Here's another sick one. This kick knob is really cool because it adds a kick or an attack to your sub bass. As you increase the level of the kick, then the sub bass is side chained to that kick. Watch this. And then there's different kick samples that you can scroll through. This is great because it makes our 808s more punchy. And then they have a number of different multi-chain effects here to further enhance your bass. Let's check this out. So with these 2 knobs and then the terrain pad, you can essentially get an infinite variety of 808 sub basses. Then there's additional controls here. You can adjust the length of that sub bass, the tone, and then there's release and glide features. This randomize function is really cool. If you click it, it randomizes this terrain pad to allow you another assortment of different sounds. So lots of fun there. Also, if you're stuck on ideas for the sub bass pattern, they have pre-built patterns here by selecting this loop function here. These keys will trigger the pattern from C2 all the way up to E2. That one sounds funky. You can even alter and add swing or add double time or half time to it. Really funky. So this is an awesome creative tool to get you some pounding sub basses with infinite results. You can learn more about Subcraft and get a discount down in the links below. All right, let's move on to the synths and stabs. And oftentimes in Rufige drum and bass, it plays on the nostalgia by incorporating 90s rave stabs. So I have this sample of the Mentasm over here. You can find this also in our icons pack. I'm just gonna start the sample over here because I'm gonna play it as a stab. And we can just fine tune it here, get it right at the start of that note. And then I'm gonna play a pattern like So I'm playing it very low, almost an octave below the regular key. And I'm just playing this out by ear. I'm not really following any key or scale because in Rufige drum and bass, usually we just play it by ear and go by vibe. And this sounded good to me as playing this sample. And since it's pitched down so much and sounding so lo-fi, we can EQ the sound. I've been using this EQ a lot recently from Arteria. It's called the Pre-1973. It just has a couple of knobs here, and this is great when you just want to make quick decisions. You don't want to overthink it. You can just turn the knob and it'll start sounding good. So let's bring up the highs here. And then we can bring up the mids around the 2100 area. We can play around with this knob until we find a sweet spot. I do like that area. Now, since we're EQing and boosting it up so much, you may want to adjust the output. Let's add some reverb and delay to this sound as well. Let's hear it with the drums. All right, and it's giving me that rude boy vibe that we're going for. To lean on that nostalgia vibe, a lot of old school rave tracks sampled cartoon sounds. And I think this is the sound of a car stopping or something. Almost sounds like a record scratch sound. I put that at the end of our 4-bar phrase here, and notice that I don't start on the very one. I start kind of in the middle into the bar, and that just adds a little more funk as this plays out, so you can hear how it sounds. It kind of plays as a call and response to the Hoover sound. That Hoover sound plays, and then it hits with that car squeak sound. Just makes it more funky. Now, if we were to repeat this 4-bar pattern over and over, it would get repetitive. So one key is to start increasing your loop. So instead of 4-bar, let's make it 8 bars and add some more variation. So this time with the 8-bar, I'm gonna remove that tire screech sound at the end. So it only happens once here. And instead of a tire screech, we'll add something different here. So what we're gonna add at the end of this 8-bar is kind of this hip hop stab here. And we can add some reverb and delay to this sound as well to add some wetness. Okay, that's sounding good. All right, and let's hear the pattern. All right, and then for some eeriness, let's employ a pad like this one from Ripgroove that I sampled. Now, under the sustain mode of the sampler, let's click this to loop this section here. Key is using this crossfade, which allows us to smoothly fade between the end and beginning so it doesn't click. And then we have this. All right, let's clean up our arrangement. So since there's overlapping sounds, we can remove the Hoover here so that car screech get full attention, as well as the hip hop stab, which happens here. We can remove the Mentasm here as well, which will make it a lot cleaner. To add more variation, a common technique used in Rufige is to switch and cut breaks. So I'm employing the Amen from Paradox's Coaxial here. I love how resonant the snare sounds in this Amen break. And I just have this pattern like this. And I'm using my slicing preset to cut up this break. So I have these filter knobs available. I'm automating the filter cutoff here. So if the amens are playing, you want to cut out the main drum so we have a switch up. So we have a pretty strong 8-bar section here, and notice how we started with smaller increments, and that's my approach with production. What you want to do is start with the smaller building blocks or increments, such as the 4-bar loop. What you're trying to do is get that to sound really good, and then move away the 4-bar to make it an 8-bar loop by adding variations such as bass switch ups, different synth sounds, and as well as a drum switch ups. The whole idea is we're trying to build and move up incrementally from 4-bar, 8-bar, finally to a very strong 16-bar block, which I call the basing building block for arranging your track. Because once you have a really strong 16-bar block, it becomes super easy to arrange and build up the full length of your track. To learn more about how to arrange drum and bass, I have a number of videos which you can watch up here. So with that said, let's extend this into a 16-bar section. So at the very end of the 16, I'm using a completely different amen pattern compared to this one here. That's just some subtle difference to help the brain detect that the track is evolving and that there is subtle differences. Actually, I'm going to move this one at the end and we'll have this one here, just like the sound of this one over here. One more trick to add variation. Let's switch up the break at the middle of the 16-bar block, namely on this position here. I'm employing this old school Planet V break here. It's mirroring that Steppa pattern. It's playing for 2 bars. And since we're using this as a switch up, we can do something neat here. And instead of switching and cutting right at the beginning of the bar, we can cut here. So stop the Planet V break from here and then bring back the Steppa break from here. So we have this kind of switch up. Let's hear it from the amen drop. That sounds pretty neat. Now we're getting very close to having a very strong 16-bar block. And just for a final touch, I want to just use a completely different bass sound at the end of the 16-bar phrase. So let's pull up Gnarly Volume 2 and let's find a neat sub bass we can use. This one is perfect, the deep and deadly preset. And I'll just play a simple pattern like this. So when this happens, we're gonna cut out Subcraft so it switches. Now we have switch up like this. All right, let's hear the 16-bar block. All right, now we have a really strong 16-bar block, and we can use this to start arranging the track. So over on the far right here, I have a quick arrangement where I have the intro just playing the drums and the pad, and then you have that main drop that we built up, and then a little switch up where some sounds are removed here. I take out the pad, and we might even automate the bass here. Now on the following 16-bar block, just to add some variation, we want to add something different. So I'm going to add a break switch up. So all I do is I bounce the main break to audio. And we just want to do a little drum edit. It's all about these small little drum edits and just chopping each slice here. And then we can reverse each slice. So we have this. And then we can add a filter sweep using auto filter here and some automation. And it just adds a quick, neat little change up before this pink section here. Finally, as I mentioned, we can change up the bass as the track progresses. So using the terrain pad, we can move and change the position, and that'll give us a different bass sound. So we can change the pad position or to around here so it gets more distorted, so that there is a change up as the track progresses. All right, now that we have all the elements, let's hear the track in full. sounding deadly. Hope you enjoyed watching me create the rude boy Rufige sounds of drum and bass. Key lesson here is the drum and bass patterns, as well as the approach of starting with smaller increments and building up to a strong 16 bar block, which then becomes your basic building block of your arrangement. My name is Stranger. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. For more drum and bass samples and presets, check out deviantaudio.com. To learn more about drum and bass sound design, check this playlist up here. And if you want to see me recreate some drum and bass classics, check this playlist up here. Alright, until the next video, stay creative and peace out.